I'm Jim Collison and live from the Gallup campus here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, a special CliftonStrengths Summit 2016 edition, recorded on September 20th, 2016. This special edition of Call to Coach was designed to highlight some of the more popular sessions that were given during the CliftonStrengths Summit in 2016. We'll be interviewing session leaders on the best material of their sessions. Murray Guest is our guest today. Murray has been partnering with organizations through strengths-based solutions to develop effective leaders, engage teams in sustainable cultural change, and have some fun along the way. This is through strategic partnerships, consulting, one-on-one coaching, workshops, and online programs. His 15-plus years of experience in key leadership roles across a range of industries are combined with effective interpersonal leadership, coaching, and communication skills have provided tailored approaches and achieved awesome results. He became a Gallup-Certified Strengths Coach in February 2015 and has worked with well over 200 people in that time. Murray presented at the CliftonStrengths Summit on building a strengths-based culture. Murray, or Muzz, as we will call you for the rest of the interview, welcome to Call to Coach.
Jim, it's fantastic to be here talking to you. It's morning on Wednesday the 21st here and afternoon for you on the 20th. So it's great we can connect across the world again. And wonderful to see you in the flesh at the summit and connect with so many people. I absolutely love the summit, love connecting with people, and really proud of how the session went when we talked about building a strengths-based culture, lots of discussion and questions. And I'm really looking forward to sharing some of that key information with you and the listeners today.
Yeah, we'll go about 30 minutes in the interview. I'll remind folks who are listening, your top 5: relator, futuristic, individualization, communication, and responsibility. Murray, how do you, when you think about your building a strengths-based culture and all the work that you've done as a coach, how do you fit those top 5 into your coaching?
That's a fantastic question, Jim. And just as a reminder, as Relator is my number 1, you can call me Muzz from now on for this session. And because Jim, is that your full name? Let's just check in for a minute.
It's actually James, but only my mother calls me that. Yes.
Okay, there we go. So that's good. That means we're aligned on that. So that's a really good question. So around my top 5, when I found out my top 5, it sort of highlighted a process that I was doing already and then gave me a sort of a deeper understanding about that process. So relator number 1, for me, build relationships, whether it's one-on-one or with a key contact in the organization. Futuristic, where do they want to go? What does that look like? What's the vision? And then individualization, number 3, what are their individual needs? What do they want to achieve? And how can we help them get there? Communication is key. That's my number 4. How do we then communicate that out amongst the business, get people on board, understand the change? And if it's an individual I'm coaching, it's like, well, how do we communicate your message out to the rest of the world? And responsibility, this is my number 5, and it's my anchor. And it really is, I'm that textbook responsibility person, driven to serve others, driven to serve my clients. And yeah, I can overdial that sometimes into weakness and be, I said I'd send that email Friday night, 10 o'clock, quick, I better do that. Because I said I'd tell the client I'd do that. But for me, it's really holding the client accountable and really serving them.
Yeah. And we experienced that a little bit. We've tried to record this a couple times, and I think you canceled it once and I've canceled it once. And your responsibility really came out in that as well. So I appreciate that. Hey, so your session title, Building a Strengths-Based Culture, that word culture gets thrown around. It's super popular right now. We think about how people are using that. So let's set the stage by talking about what is culture. Can you kind of give us your definition for the rest of the series on what we're talking about here?
Yeah, great question, Jim. For me, it's what we do and say as leaders in an organization and what we allow others to do and say. It's what's left when you take out all the policies and procedures. It's really about the interactions between people. Culture is really the way that we talk to each other within an organization and also to our customers and our suppliers. I like to think about it around that culture is that sort of organic sort of entity that just keeps on growing and exists. It's like you can walk into a room and you go, a joke's been told, but no one's laughing, but I can tell that joke's happened. bit like you can walk in an organization, you go, I can feel there's a culture here. I can see it's different. People talk to each other differently in the corridors, in the hallways. That's what culture is. It's not what's written in the policy and procedures. And from a strengths-based approach, what we're really talking about is, well, then how do we start to integrate strengths into that culture, into that everyday language, so that it's just part of the way we work day in, day out?
It's been said oftentimes in personal interactions that you can all interactions either positive or negative. There's no neutral interaction. Is there the same thing in your experience with culture, and that in a company they either have a thriving culture or a starving culture? Are there areas in between? And really, who sets the tone for that culture in organizations?
Great. I'm just reflecting back on some of the clients I've worked with, and just as a great example, a client I've worked with in the past, it was a different type of culture we were developing before I was doing strength. So going back in my time as a consultant, and one of our clients that spent close to $2 million on a program. Large site, very large organization, about 2,000 employees, but they'd invested significantly over the years. We went to a part of that organization on site, and you'd think that we were there yesterday with our coaching, with our workshops. You could see it was just alive, living and breathing. It was fantastic. And you could see in the way they talked to each other, the way they interacted. We then went to another part the next day, and you think that they'd never even seen us before, never even heard of us. The thing was, we were there at that part the day before. The difference was the leadership. The frontline leaders, all the way through to the general manager or the divisional managers, were the ones that were talking about the information we'd been sharing through the coaching and the workshops. They're the ones that were keeping alive. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or 7 o'clock, or 11 o'clock at the weekly meeting, they're the ones that were keeping it alive and talking day in, day out to their teams. So really, I think leadership sets the direction of the culture. And a friend of mine, one of his favorite sayings, and I do love it, it is actually what my leader finds interesting, I find fascinating. So really, I think when leaders embrace something like, let's say, a customer-focused culture, a well-being focused culture, or safety or lean or strengths, all of those, our leaders need to be embracing it and embracing the why to keep it alive.
What makes that unique? I mean, certainly when we think about unit teams, there's more people in the unit than the leader, right? I mean, you got one leader in my 10, and you would think that the culture may be driven all the way down, at the unit level by the individuals. In a lot of cases, how are the leaders responsible for that culture being driven? What kinds of things can they influence that really make that culture move?
Fantastic. I think the other part that you just sort of hinted on, and I don't want to lose, is followers are very important as well. And we want to embrace our followers. And who are those first adopters, early adopters? Are you getting an iPhone 7, Jim? Let's just check in.
I might. I still haven't decided yet.
Yeah. So there's guys out there camping right now, aren't there? They're there. Oh, I think they've been released, so they'll sit camping out. They're saying seats worth.
Saw them in the wild this weekend. Yeah.
Got to catch them all. Hey, so the thing is, those early adopters for the phone, we have early adopters in our teams as well that are going to be the ones that are going to support us, that as leaders are rolling out these an initiative like Strengths. So once we identify them, we want to actually get them on board as well, and them sharing and them actually helping us drive. Otherwise, it's just the leaders by themselves. But going back to your other point, how do leaders do this? Every conversation is an opportunity to influence the culture. So if you're walking through the office, if that's what the sort of organization you have, or if you've got a factory, or if you've got a mine, or I've worked with a range from construction through to childcare centers, when people walk through those offices, those areas, what are the conversations you're having as a leader? Because sometimes I can't hear what you're saying because what you're doing is speaking so loudly. It's the short conversations. It's not like, oh, today's Strengths Day, I'm going to talk about strengths on a Friday. But the other 4 days, we're going to talk about it. Or we go, hey, we talk about strengths at the start of the meeting, but I didn't recognize strengths in Jim and Muzz for the rest of the day. Those little conversations where it just becomes part of our subconscious and our habits are what will change the culture.
So some specific, when we think about specific ways for leaders to leverage strengths to change culture, I mean, I think that's the secret sauce a lot of times, right? That what the stuff that people are looking for when we think, okay, Muzz, we can talk about this till we're blue in the face, but how do we actually do it, right? I mean, we give it a lot of lip service, but what are some of the pieces when we think about leveraging strengths in those environments to make real culture change? How do we do that?
Yeah, thanks. So I like to break up the culture into 4 areas. What are the leaders doing, the systems, the environment, and the individual? So we touched on a little bit around the leaders and the leaders and the individuals. Like, what are these guys doing? The ladies, how are we talking about it? From an environment perspective, that's all that hard environment. The notice boards, the physical environment. How can we start to tap into putting things in those hard sections, whether it's like a notice board, an intranet site, coffee mugs, all of that influences the culture. And then in our systems, and this is where leaders can really influence the systems as well. So things like our performance management system, do we just go, let's have a strengths-based culture for 12 months and then let's have a performance management discussion which has got nothing to do with strengths? Or is it related back to how someone has demonstrated their strengths to deliver in their role throughout the year? Those performance management discussions, of course, should never happen just at the end of the year. Let's say they're happening every week, every month, and we're having those formal check-ins. How are we integrating strengths into those conversations? So leaders, I really encourage them to think about how they can just be bringing that into the informal, but also the formal discussions. The other part is task assignment. Yes, there's all the research in your gym you talked about. We could talk about till the cows come home about how increased productivity, increased engagement with strengths. But what does that look like when your boots are on the ground? Who are you actually assigning the different work to? And how are you encouraging them to actually have 2 different people in a role, which we might think are the same role, but they're actually approaching that through their strengths differently so that they are getting to actually do the role with more confidence and getting more flow. So for a quick example, I've worked with teams where we've got leaders who need to engage their teams at 6:30 in the morning before they go out and do some high-risk work. You know, pre-start meetings, safety is key. Operations, what's the work we're going to do? How are we going to complete that safely? And I had leaders telling the people, you need to talk about it exactly the same way every morning in the same process and the same structure. How do you think that feels? Doesn't feel real good. It feels very robotic. It doesn't feel authentic. So what we did was what I've done with those leaders is say, embrace your strengths and encourages people to deliver those messages through a process of using their strengths. So if I'm high in a range or if I'm high in communication, what does that look like? Or if I'm an achiever or competition, how do I use that? Or if I've got more strategic thinking themes, how do I use those? And so leaders really being open to the notion that we can have people in the same role, approaching them differently through their strengths for their success and coaching them on that and encouraging them on that. And then you'll start to see those increases in productivity, engagement, and happiness, and interaction and communication.
From an environmental setup, if we go back to the environment, because I think there's some interesting action or some points in there that people can get started on. What's some of the best things that you've seen when we think about changing or things we do in the environment, especially Muzz, when we think about people being resistant to this kind of change, right? Maybe there are some who do like the safety briefing every day the same way, that consistency, but sometimes changing culture requires change. The environment is one of these things that changes first. What have you seen work really well in that area as far as these tools of, bringing things to action planning and setting things up on the internet and that kind of stuff? What have you seen?
Yeah, I'd say the best way I've seen to do this is think about it from subliminal marketing. And the way that you might be driving to work and you hear on the radio that there's a new smoothie out at your local shop and you go, oh, that sounds interesting. Then you're driving to the Riverfront campus and you see a billboard and it's got the latest smoothie and you go, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. Then you get into into the office and there's a flyer there which is something about, hey, buy one, get one free smoothie. And you're going, you know what, I really think I should get one of those. Yeah, I can see that. So it's a bit like that with this cultural change we want to do within our own organizations. So what's the message when you drive, when you arrive, when you get into your office, when you first get into there? Is there a notice board? Is there a message? Is there an electronic sign? What does that look like? When you log onto your PC, let's say you sit down in traditional office and you've got that office and you open up your laptop or your desktop, is there a message there again around strengths? Is there something on the walls? So from a psychology point of view, what works is when we have those little messages which aren't over bombarding. We don't want to be feeling like, hey, there's 34 strengths thrown atop me when I walk in the front door. However, is there a way that we're actually encouraging strengths to be part of our culture and our language in a real positive way throughout the organization, and building those neural pathways around strengths is just part of the way we work? So one of the organizations I worked with, I worked for Jim for 11 years, was Mars Incorporated, as in Mars bars, Snickers, M&Ms. Great organization with got great memories working there. They have the 5 principles as part of the Mars family that they brought in. They did that fantastically, and they still do to this day. The way the 5 principles are just part of the way that they work day in, day out. It's on the walls, but it's also integrated in the way that they interact with suppliers, interact with customers. And I left there 12 years ago, but I can still recite the 5 principles because it was just part of the way that it worked. And it was just part of the DNA. It was just in there. It wasn't over the top, but it was there. I also don't want to miss the point you mentioned earlier about, yes, we could do that, but if I'm not engaged in the why are we doing strengths? And I'm seeing this information on the walls on my computer, or, you know, a manager's talking to me about it. It's really important that we do help our leaders and our people in teams understand the why of strengths and how it really helps them and makes the job easier. I had a really good conversation with a leader the other day, and he goes, does this mean I have all this extra work to do now? I have to go and talk to people about strengths. And I said, no, actually, this should make your job much easier. I said, you're going to have much better conversations around people, what they're doing and how they're doing it. And it's actually going to have a change in the way that they're actually doing their work, and they're going to be more engaged to it. And his face lit up, and we talked about what that could look like and how he could have those conversations.
So certainly you've seen things that haven't worked when we think about going in. You've mentioned a few of those, but any in particular, like any warning signs you want to say, this is probably something you don't want to get into, or fads that may be out there?
Yeah, okay. So from my experience, what I've noticed is it's when, let's say a leader gets so excited. It's a bit like when we overdial our strengths and they become a weakness. And a leader gets so excited. He's been to a strengths workshop, or he's had some strengths coaching, and he goes, wow, this has changed my life. I love it. Now I'm just going to be like the strengths evangelist 2000% that you've never seen before. And people think he's been brainwashed. And what happens is it feels like there's this level of authenticity that's lost. He's just coming in, or she might be coming in and just trying to implement it straight away without the why. And I've seen that fall pretty quickly, because it's sort of, there's this huge sort of impact. And what does this mean? Is it real? As I said, no authenticity, and then you don't get the engagement. So I'd say that's one of those ones. I also say when people aren't consulted. So if we actually start implementing change, we start making some, let's say, some differences in the office or somewhere in a production facility, wherever it might be. And we're saying, this is now what's happening. And you come in Monday morning, you're like, whoa, this is my space. Who's moved this? What's happened? Why is this here? I didn't get a chance to consult. I had some great ideas. I didn't get the chance to share them. So consultation is key, and knowing who to consult, who those influencers are is very important. So I've seen that fall down pretty quick, and I've done that too myself.
Yeah.
So yeah.
When you think of a mid-sized organization, that's pretty easy for those, even a large organization, that's pretty easy if you've come in as a coach at the top level for them to push that down, or the struggle of coming in at the middle level and trying to push that both up and down. What have you found, or what kind of advice would you give to coaches who are coming in to really influence a culture to make sure something like that doesn't happen, right? That we don't get this blast of all of a sudden there's posters on the walls and those kinds of things. How have you recommended from a management perspective that they approach this to ease it in, or what's the advice to get that communication? Because I think that's the hardest part, is getting the somebody has to hear about these things for the first time at some point, right? And what's that first right conversation for you to have with the folks that are going to be going through this?
So my thought, Jim, on this is you need to have a plan. What is the engagement plan? What is the strengths implementation plan? What is the way we're going to communicate? We don't want people to talk exactly the same way. We actually want to talk through their strengths. And at the same time, what we want them to do is to be talking authentically about how strengths has impacted their lives. So we really need to get those leaders on board first. People love a story. So we want leaders that can tell a good story around strengths and how it's helped them and share that with their teams. But going back to what I just said, I think it's also critical to have a plan and say, well, then what does this look like if we're going to really change culture? How do we have a plan over the next 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, whatever it might be, to slowly implement it? Get those quick wins up front, but also let's make it sustainable as well.
Can you talk, you said quick wins. Can you talk a little bit about when you go in and do an assessment and you're working with an organization, what are those quick wins you look for? And maybe they're not the same every time, but how do you measure those quick wins early, and what are you looking for?
Yeah, it's something which I know I can always do better, Jim, with the clients I work with. What I really do try and do is say, what does success look like for you? And we try and capture that. And sometimes I think I get a little too excited. Maybe we could do that better. But certainly, it's a good point. Quick wins, what I've seen definitely as a change in people's attitudes and their day-to-day behaviors. People getting more confident in their work. People having the conversations they weren't having before. In teams, I've noticed sometimes we can get some toxic undercurrent. We can get that sort of the things that aren't being said that are just there and they're causing some disharmony in the team. I often say to teams, strengths isn't about unicorns and rainbows. Strengths is about actually having a framework and the language to have those tough conversations as well and giving people feedback and talking about it. So I've noticed as a quick win, people start to have those conversations they previously didn't have the confidence or the language to have around, maybe where there was some tension or some, I guess maybe some misunderstanding between people. So I've seen that. The other thing I've seen is definitely in the confidence and the way people are showing up when they're presenting. A lot of managers and team members need to get in front of other people at some stage and helping them understand their strengths. And we know the stats around people and how, you know, the fear of public speaking, right? If we can help people be their true selves, be more authentic, and speak up front with confidence, there's a huge impact there. So there's some other things I've seen as well.
In your presentation, you gave kind of an acronym, right? RACI. Can you talk when we think about that? You know, you talked about those 4 areas: leadership, you know, with the leadership, the individual, systems, and environment. Can you kind of walk through that? How you might use that in a situation to change culture?
Yeah. So there's 2 bits there. One is the leadership, environment, systems, and individual. So the idea is that as part of your plan, you identify the initiatives you're going to take in those areas and get commitment from leaders to drive that, and then identify your strengths champions and develop the plan across those areas. And then the next step to help you really do that, the acronym you just referenced has been around for some time in project management. It's RACI. Who's responsible, who's accountable, who needs to be consulted, and who needs to be informed. What can happen with change is when we actually forget to consult and we just inform them, or we actually try and consult everybody as opposed to consulting the few we need and then informing. And then the other thing is accountable. Who's ultimately accountable for delivering this? And then responsible is they're the people doing the work. So we can have people who are accountable, who are also responsible, but we can only have one person being held accountable. I was with a client last week and we're rolling out the strengths-based discussions at meetings, which is great. Just a little initiative they started to implement. I said, so who's accountable? And they said, oh, well, I am, and he is, and she is. I said, well, no. I said, so who's going to make sure it happens? I said, we all are. I said, is that going to work? How's that worked for you before? Oh, well, sometimes one of us does it, and then we have to rush around at the end. And I said, let's just see, what if I said only one of you is held accountable? Who would that be? And we had a bit of silence, and we thought about it, and we got to someone that was, right, okay, I'll do it. I'm going to be held accountable. And then when I've talked to them since, it's like, yep, we made sure it happened. It was very clear. The key part out of this too is that consultation piece. People want to know what's happening. This is their second home where they go to work, and a lot of people love it. We want them to love coming to work. So let's treat them with respect and consult the right people through the process too.
Yeah, I like that. I like that you highlighted some people need to be consulted, but you can't consult everybody. Some people need to be informed only, right, from that standpoint. But sometimes we forget who to inform, right? I mean, we consult people, but then we never tell the rest of the organization, right? And so I like making sure, for me, if you're going in, this almost becomes a checklist, right? You almost need to write this out. It's just one of those things that you think, oh, you look at it and you go, oh, yeah, I get this. This is simple. But part of the implementation plan is to say who's responsible, who's accountable, who have we consulted, and who have we informed. At the end of the day, is that 100%? Like, should everyone be accounted for in the organization through this formula that you're either responsible, you're accountable, you're on the consulting team, or you've been informed? Should that equal 100%?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think what I've seen is actually helps have the conversations, get the clarity, like you're saying, okay, who is it going to be? What I have seen that work really well is at the top level, we can have who's ultimately accountable, and then we can start to break down who's accountable for chunks of work or for areas of the business. And then you start to cover pretty much close to the 100% then. Yeah.
In the session, as we kind of wind this up here, in the session, questions that were asked or aha moments for you, or when we think about, for the folks that were there, anything come out of that was particularly interesting to you in the session itself?
The main one, Jim, was people understanding my accent, but we got over that pretty quickly. I actually had a great session. We had some really good conversations about, I think, what we've been tapping into, which is the practicalities. A lot of passionate people in the session, a lot of people saying, look, I want to either drive change and change culture internally or partner with my clients for sustainable change. And it was about those practicalities. So how do I do that? So walking through that strengths-based culture development model of those 4 sections was really powerful. And people saying, so how do we do that? The other question I got was habits. And, we run off our habits and our subconscious, over 95% of the day. It's just who we are. We do it all the time. And how do we influence those habits? So how do we do that and get into that motivation? And the big one for me was the why, and understanding that it's like microwave popcorn. Have you had any microwave popcorn lately, Jim?
I eat it all the time.
I haven't had any for a while, to be honest. But what I do know is, what does the bag say on the side? Do you remember what it says on the side?
It says very hot.
It says very hot. That's true. It also says don't walk away from the microwave once you put the bag in. And what happens is you get a few kernels that are popping. You then get this massive, popcorn that's popping away in the microwave, and you start to get the trickle. And the other instruction on the bag is don't take it out once it's finished. Take it out when it's just a trickle going. So Jim takes a bag of microwave popcorn out, tips it in the bowl, sits down to watch a movie with the family. And what do you always get in the bottom of the bowl?
A few kernels.
A few kernels that didn't pop. So culture change is like that bag of popcorn. We're going to get a few people pretty quick. They're going to change. They're going to get on board and go, hey, I get this strength stuff. I love it. I'm out there. I want to talk about it. They're your strengths evangelists, your strengths champions. Empower them. And leaders need to provide the space so they can get out there and talk about it. Then you get the mass. Well, that's the aim, is we get the mass. Then we might get a few that might get it later. But then we might get a few kernels that really, you know what, I think you pigeonhole me. I don't like this strength stuff. I want to have all 34. I had that the other day. I want to have all 34. So we have some conversation. And so those kernels, you know, might take a little bit longer to come around. And it's about how do we help that process as well. So that was one of the key things we talked through in the session about giving it the right amount of time, identifying those followers, those evangelists up early in the process, and then making sure you give them the space to go out and deliver the change that you want to see.
Yeah. Would you have any advice for coaches? You know, everybody's got to approach this. Everybody has a different top 5 than you, and there's a few who might have the exact same thing as you. So you approach this from your unique top 5. But as a final question, any advice to coaches as they're going into this model on how they kind of customize it based on their own strengths and how they do this in organizations without necessarily copying your model, but taking advantage of what they're best at?
Yeah, sure, Jim. Great. So do you like the Black Eyed Peas?
I never heard them, but I know who they are.
Okay, cool. So they have a song which is "Meet Me Halfway," and I haven't been using it so much lately, but it's a simple sort of phrase that I use quite a fair bit. And the idea is that how do I use my strengths in my approach, and how do I meet with the client's strengths? So if I raced into a client and I don't know the strengths, I'm not thinking about the strengths, holding some assumptions loosely, or if I know my client's strengths, I can really partner with them through what's going to work best for them. So while I'm actually, you know, I want to be my authentic self, I also want to meet with them halfway. And as a quick tip, one of the best ways to start working with a client is get your key client contact to complete their strengths and sit down and have a conversation with them about strengths and coach them through it. And then you get to know them and understand them. And then you can tap into that to help influence them and going down the strengths journey.
Yeah, and that might be the best free strengths code you ever give out, right?
Yeah, that's right. Totally agree.
Client, and then have that conversation and really work your way into the role, to the piece. Get that conversation going first, so that the stakeholder knows, experiences that from a one-on-one standpoint, and then kind of work it from there. So good.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the things I certainly believe is that the best way to sell is to solve. And as strengths coaches, we're not salesmen, we're not salespeople, we're not sales ladies. We're passionate about strengths, but how can that help solve a problem for our clients? So let's talk about what are the problems and challenges, what they want to achieve, and then how strengths can help that. So if it's around engagement, productivity, or safety, or anything like that, and then we're tapping into that.
There may be some coaches that have additional questions for you, want to dialogue on you after they're hearing something. What's the best way to get in contact with you for that dialogue?
Yeah, great. So my company is Inspire My Business. I like to think that we can all have these inspiring conversations. I love talking to you, Jim, and listening to you. So Inspire My Business website, but certainly Facebook page. Or you can email me at murray@inspiremybusiness.com.
All right. Well, thanks for taking the time today. Anything I missed in there? Do you think we got most of the material? Anything else you'd add before I wrap it?
No, I think we covered most of it. I guess one of the key messages I did leave the session with, which is culture changes one conversation at a time. And I'd like people to think about that and think about how are they leaving people after every conversation. Are they feeling inspired, or are they feeling tired? Are they feeling uplifted? Is the self-esteem maintained or enhanced, or are they feeling, oh, geez, that wasn't good? As leaders, we are on in an organization, and the way we talk to people in those conversations is what's going to shift the culture. And have some fun doing it. This is all about some great stuff. Let's have some fun along the way. And Jim, I know you've forgotten, and that's okay, but this has been a great way to start my birthday. So thanks very much.
Well, happy birthday. Always good to do that. As other folks listen to it, you'll get to have a birthday every day as people.
Yeah.
This, right? We've recorded it on your birthday day. And what are you going to do? Anything special for your birthday?
Going out for lunch and for dinner. So lunch with my wife and dinner with the family time. Looking forward to it. Yeah.
Very good. Well, at my age, I don't celebrate them anymore. It's just one of those reminders of it.
Beautiful.
Good. Well, Muzz, thanks for taking half an hour or so, a little plus, to dig into that. We'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strength Center. If this is the first one you listen to, we'll actually have a playlist put together on our YouTube page. If you go to youtube.com and search Gallup Strength Center, you'll find our YouTube page, and we'll have a playlist of all these sessions that we've recorded from Summit 2016. Those will be available for you out there. If you're interested in becoming a Gallup-Certified Strengths Coach, you can see a list of all of our courses that lead to certification on our courses page. Just go to courses.gallup.com. If you have any questions, you can send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Or if you're on the live page, if you go over to the coaches blog, there's a form right there on the page. If you'd like to join us for the 2017 Clifton Strengths Summit, Murray, you probably are already planning, right, to be with us July 17th, 18th, and 19th, 2017?
I'll be there, and I'm really looking forward to it. Jim, if anyone is thinking about going, I highly recommend it. The keynotes were fantastic. The breakouts were great. Yeah, I'll be there.
Good. Well, registration's not open yet, but we are super, super close. So we're recording this here on September 20th. I think by the 1st of October, we'll have registration open and available for you. Head out to CliftonStrengthsSummit.com. And if you found this helpful, we'd ask that you share it. Well, thank you for everyone for joining us, and we'll look forward to the next Call to Coach. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.